afternoon. This afternoon, I know we have been through workshops. Our workshop was extremely active and engaging. We've heard great keynotes. We've had many ideas flourishing and moving around, and many of our spirits have been convicted. So I ask in this brief moment that I have with you, that you would lay aside any of your partisan politics, any assumptions about what you know or think you know about race. I ask that you open your minds and your ears and your hearts, and in this moment, reflect with me on how do we maximize this very moment in history together. This moment that we're in right here at this conference, this moment that we're in our state, the moment that we're in our nation, the moment that we're in the world, and think with me on the simple phrase, we must persist. We're living in a moment in history where women are faced with great opportunities in education, in corporate spaces, even in the home, redefining the role of a mother, of a parent. We're in a time where our numbers even exceed men in many graduate school settings. Yet we are also at a time where women are still in the minority in top-tier leadership positions, where misogyny and sexism is prevalent, not only in certain cultural genres of music and entertainment, but in the boardrooms, in the classrooms, and in the national public discourse. We are in a moment of great opportunity and a moment of great challenge. In their article entitled, "Why Women Need More Than a Seat at the Table," Tali Mendelberg from Princeton University and Christopher Karpowitz from Brigham Young University found that women are silenced when they are in the minority. Between 2007 and 2009, they conducted a study to assess how women exercise their authority in groups when they are a minority within those groups. And their study found that where women make up a minority, they speak less, they receive more hostile interruptions, they refrain from articulating their views, and they're rarely rated as influential or powerful. This group is less likely to discuss and use these views when making decisions, and in other words, their study found that in meetings where women are scarce, they are actively disrespected, and the group as a whole suffers because the range of perspective shrinks. We're seeing this play out today on the national stage, unfortunately, with the recent treatment of both Senator Elizabeth Warren and Senator Kamala Harris. I'm not talking politics today, I'm talking women. During the confirmation proceedings of the recent confirmation proceedings of our Attorney General, Senator Warren was taking her turn and attempted to read a letter by the late Coretta Scott King. While doing so, a male senator in the same hearing attempted to silence her. Senator Mitch McConnell said, quote, "She was warned. She was given an explanation, and nevertheless, she persisted." Nothing worse than a woman who won't stop talking. Recently, Senator Kamala Harris also experienced attempted silencing while performing her job. As a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee during a hearing not once but twice, she was attempted to be silenced again and yet again. And yet, Senator Harris persisted. These moments of conflict, of challenge, of blockages, of boundary setting, of limitations provide the atmosphere for great and unsuspecting leaders to arise. So what do we need today when we talk about leadership? We need moral leaders. Moral leaders are different from your typical conversation on leadership because moral leaders aim to serve. Instead of showcasing their own skills, moral leaders tend to develop the capacities of those whom they lead. We not only need moral leaders, we need creative leaders. We need leaders who come up against a block and a wall and find a strategy and an effective way to get around. A creative leader who is not afraid of tough and courageous conversations, but is able to communicate even within those conversations in an effective and an effectual way. We need transformational leaders. You know, transformational leaders differ from transactional leaders in that transformational leaders charge the hearts and the minds of those whom they lead. Transformational leaders lead with a vision and a mission, but they always link it back to those whom they lead and link back to their hunger and their why. We need relational leaders, leaders who believe that no one can be left behind. Relational leaders who have coffee with you and instill trust in you and create relationship with those whom they lead because they realize that true leadership has less to do with the leader and more to do with the led. We need daring leaders, those who will step out on faith and do as St. Augustine said, faith is a faith that believes what you do not yet see. And the reward of this great faith is to see what you believe. Daring leaders dream a world that does not yet exist. And in the words of Langston Hughes, it's a world that will know sweet freedom's way, where greed no longer saps the soul, nor avarice blights our day. A world I dream where black or white, whatever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth, and every man and woman are free. Daring leaders are not afraid to stand and proclaim with wit and truth the words very similar to those spoken by Sojourner Truth in her famous Ain't I a Woman speech, where she says to a group of men who doubt her capacity, her intellect, and her ability to lead. She says, but if the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, then all these women gathered here today ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. That's a daring leader. To proclaim with words that does not yet exist and call it into existence. That's a persistent leader, for we must persist. So what can we do right now? We've heard a lot of advice, we've heard a lot of statistics, we've heard many testimonies, but what can each of us in this room do right now? I just have 3 proposals. The first proposal is that we can stop focusing so much on what others are doing to us and focus more on what we are doing to us and for us. Do you know that women participate in sexism and misogyny? Do you know that women actually belittle other women for the sake of their own rise? That women actually backbite and belittle other women. This is a conversation I wouldn't necessarily want to have in mixed company. I just want to have this conversation among my sisters. Because I think it is important that we acknowledge the ways in which we default to, confront them with truth, and decide that we're going to engage with women in a different way. We need to shift and begin to support one another in obvious and unsuspecting ways. One simple example of that is what I call the echo effect. There may only be 2 of you on a board committee, but when she says something that makes sense, rather than allow it to gloss over and then be restated by a man in the room who gets the applause, echo what she says. Endorse the idea. Echo what another woman leader has told you, taught you, walked you through. The more we echo one another, the more we validate our voices, and the more we begin to move together ahead. So let us stop focusing so much on what others are doing to us. Focus on what we're doing to us and for us. Secondly, let's challenge ourselves and one another to stretch beyond our notions and our small worldviews and our bubbles, to begin to embrace those who are different from who we are. Expand our notions of what it means to be brilliant and beautiful and smart and meaningful and worthy. Beauty has more hues than blonde or brunette or brown hair. Beauty comes wrapped in a hijab. Beauty looks different. And truthfully, that's what makes it beautiful. The variety and the spice of life is what enhances the experience and the power. So let us be willing to stretch and to have difficult conversations. Be willing to stretch outside of your comfort zone and have a conversation with a woman who thinks differently than you, who has a different political leaning, and not only start the conversation, but actually listen, engage, allow yourself to feel what she feels, to experience what she experiences. Learn something new about a topic you haven't yet explored. Rather than have judgment and opinion, get some facts behind these many topics that are floating around in the space of social media and the news media. Learn something new. How can you get involved in local politics? How much power does local politics actually have over your community, your living situation, the schools, the children that your children go to school with? Learn something new. And finally, speak up. Become a better advocate for yourself and for other women who do not have your position of privilege. We don't like to talk about privilege. We code it in guilt and we code it in denial. But everyone in this room is privileged. Some are privileged because of the color of their skin, because of their family lineage. Some are privileged because of their faith. They're Christian in a Christian country. Some are privileged because of their educational attainment. Use your privilege to help someone who's less privileged. Speak up for someone who has a different problem than you have. Speak up for someone who has a different challenge than you have. For Dr. Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Because you're comfortable today, there's no guarantee that you will be comfortable tomorrow. And may there be someone who speaks up on your behalf when you're in a place of need. I recently had the wonderful opportunity to participate in a women's build for Habitat for Humanity. Anybody in here done a Habitat build? Habitat rocks. In the course of the build, it was very interesting to watch how we all processed what we were experiencing. The build brought together women from all different sectors of society, politicians and business leaders, nonprofit workers, volunteer workers, people who had their own, women who had their own businesses, right? Entrepreneurs. I met a woman who was an electrician who actually maintains large-scale churches and businesses and warehouses. Who knew? During the course of the build, it was funny to watch how all of us were uncomfortable. You know, we had to do things that required our hands to get dirty and our nails to break and our hair to get messed up. We put on construction hats that probably 50 other people, clean or not clean, had already worn. We got our clothes dirty, paint, caulking, all kinds of dirt and mess and grime in an unfinished home. You ever been in an unfinished home? You have to walk carefully because you never know if that board is going to flip up with the nail or, walk on this portion so that you don't step in the puddle, right? An unfinished home full of promise and potential, but yet not complete. So during the course of the build, we had to stretch outside of our comfort zones. We had to get in cramped spaces with women we never met before. We had to begin to find ways to connect and relate. I wanted to learn more now about what it means to be an electrician and how do you know how to do that and where does the wiring go? What? There's infrastructure. There are things in places we don't see but we depend on so much. So during the course of the build, we started not knowing each other, feeling somewhat awkward, not quite feeling comfortable. And by the end of the build, because we released all of our guards and our assumptions and presumptions, we have now, many of us, become friends who stay in contact and who think we can truly caulk a window. This women's build reminded me so much of this conversation on persistence and the importance of our persistence. We must not only persist to be stellar in our careers, but we must persist in connecting with another woman, in supporting another woman, in helping someone who looks different than we look. Because it is incumbent upon each and every one of us in our seats of privilege, exposure, and access to provide more, to create this country into the country that we would want it to be, our communities into the communities we dream and dare to see. I'm a black woman with a white mother, but I bet no one in here would have assumed I was white. In this country, we focus so much on the difference, the color of hair, the color of skin. We focus so much on the superficial, the resume, the schools, the pedigree. We focus so much on all of those exterior things that we miss what matters most. Dr. Angelou said it best in her poem, Human Family. I note the obvious differences in the human family, for there are so many that you can count and delineate. I note the obvious differences between each sort and type, but we are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. My prayer today as I leave is fashioned from a poem by Sir Francis Drake. I hope that these words and this conference disturb each and every one of us to step outside of our comfort zones. Disturb us so much when we are too pleased with ourselves and when our dreams have come true because we have dreamed too little. Disturbed so much so that we are disturbed by the abundance of things we possess, so much so that we have lost our thirst for the waters of life. May we be so disturbed today that it forces us to dare more boldly, to venture on wilder seas where storms will show their mastery, where losing sight of land, we will finally see the stars. We need some women who are willing to persist. Persist beyond the bad news, persist beyond the challenges, step outside of their comfort zones, and risk being a leader when you never even thought you could lead. If you're here today, won't you rise as a commitment to saying, I will persist? If you're here with me and you're willing to persist with me, won't you just stand to your feet? I bet there's some persistent women in this place. This is a room full of women who are committed to persisting. A room full of women committed to casting fear aside. It doesn't mean we won't ever be afraid, but we'll just take up that fear and keep on walking. This is a room full of women who are willing to dare and to lead others into places we've not yet seen, but when we have the faith to believe the unseen, our reward will be seeing it come to pass. Our children's generation are depending on every single one of you. Our parents' generation is depending on every single one of us. All that has been poured out this day should be returned through our persistence, our commitment, and our determination to persist nonetheless.